Thank you, everyone. I've got the graveyard shift, so I'm going to try and put a bit of energy in this for you. Try and lift everyone's vibe up a bit. Okay, let's see, we go. Yeah, okay. So today I'm just going to give you, first of all, just discuss the genesis of the Northern Breeding Business, or NB2, program. Talk a bit about the pilot project, which started in 2019 with its genesis until its recent completion in 2024, June last year. And then we've moved on to phase 2 and a little bit about the progress there. So NB2 had its genesis with NABRAC as part of our consultation framework. MLA gets its priorities for us to go and do work and generate research and adoption activities from our RACs. And NABRAC came up with the idea that there was a lack of adoption of technology and knowledge within the industry, and they wanted to do something about that. That also came on the back of a very big study, a survey across the industry in the north, which was called, colloquially called Cash Cow, which demonstrated that in 25% of the herds in the north, we had a calf mortality rate of 15% or greater, and we also saw a great deal of missingness in our adult herd as well. So profitability of the northern herds were lower than what we had expected. Our calf survival was less than what we had expected, and our adoption rate of technologies to try and improve that just weren't there. And so NABRAC had got together a group around there, so state governments across the north, universities in the north, and we decided to ask, well, what can we do about that? We also looked at adoption models, and we came up with a peer-to-peer network, which we copied from the Red Meat Profit Partnership in New Zealand, which seemed to work very well for them. And so after we did that worldwide review of adoption projects, we then said, okay, well, we'll run with something very similar to the Red Meat Profit Partnership, which became NB2. And we wanted producers to baseline their basic production metrics, because at the time, and even today, majority of producers would have a bit of difficulty if you asked them how many kilograms of beef per adult equivalent do you produce. Many couldn't tell you. Some can. But also how they compare within their group, within their region, and identifying gaps in knowledge and skills that they may have. And how do you do that if you're not making decisions based on data? So data-driven decisions became really important to NB2. And when there were these knowledge gaps identified, to feed that back to MLA and to the RAC, to be able to say, well, we'd really like you to go and investigate this. This is something I've taken from Ian McLean from Bush Agribusiness. If you looked at the Australian Beef Report, the last 3, you'll probably find these 3 variables there. They seem to be staying quite consistent. There are also 3 variables that you'll find that explain 80% of the difference, not just between the top 25% of businesses and the average beef business, but it also explains majority of profit within beef businesses in the north. And that is growth rate. So we wanted to increase growth rate with NB2. Reproductive rate, we wanted to increase that, and we wanted to decrease herd mortality. For us in particular, we wanted to focus on calf mortality. And those 3 things contribute to majority of profit that can be measured by increased kilograms of beef per adult equivalent. So we set up the program, got facilitators to come together. MLA's program commitment and NABRAC's program commitment was that we would provide funding, we would provide training in facilitation skills. We would get group facilitators trained up. We would also get a producer from that group and train them up also in facilitation skills, as was found in the Red Meat Profit Partnership, just to help improve success. The groups demanded confidentiality, and so did NABRAC, and so we gave them that. And then we also applied a monitoring and evaluation framework over that. And so when the groups were formed, they went through training and monitoring, mentoring, and then recording baseline data. We then got that data analysed and we gave it back to them individually. And then the individual businesses got to make a decision, and that was, do I share my business data with the rest of the people in my group? Most people did that. Most businesses did share from corporate, Indigenous and non-Indigenous businesses, which we're very grateful for. On that sharing of data and talking about the benefits and the costs of what they were doing in their management, the group themselves then came up with interventions. And those interventions, I'll show you, were varied. And not all of them were really focused on productivity, but it was something that the group themselves decided they were going to put their own money in, and they were going to implement an intervention and to go back and measure the practice change. So after the intervention, we went back, we measured again, only 1 year, and then we then came back again and repeated the cycle. That data that we were asking them to collect was based on 3 templates. There was a herd template, in which we wanted to increase our winning rate by at least 5%, decrease our mortality rate by 1%, and get a 10 kilogram overall increase in live weight per AE. We also had feed base, and we wanted them to measure how much feed they were producing and what was the condition of the land that they were producing that land from, and also look at their long-term carrying capacity. And then environmental, again, there was a lot of overlap between the 3. We found that really focusing on improving land condition and focusing on improving productivity of the feed base was pretty key to that. With our herd flow template, as Ian McLean would say, I quote him again, you have to know your herd numbers. Not only do you have to know your herd numbers, but it really helps when those herd numbers are reconciled. And so you can't cheat when you do the MB2 herd flow template. Your numbers have to be have to reconcile at the end of every year. And if they don't, Bush Agribusiness, who was doing all the analysis of the herd, would send it back to the producer and say, you've got it wrong, this can't be right. Or even if some creative accounting was performed, then the herd template would go back to the producers and they would say, you've got it wrong, you've got to get this right. And it was up to the facilitator, producer coordinator and the rest of the group to work with that individual to get it right. But it's interesting that with the herd flow, it really identifies 25% of your business asset, but 100% of the revenue generation in northern beef businesses. We also got the producers to do a basic cash flow. In the beginning, it was just cash flow. It's since progressed after the pilot to where we got feedback from the producers who said it'd be really good if we got cost of production and you did a whole of business analysis, and that's what we're offering now. It's really good value to the producers themselves. And we also wanted to highlight important metrics, which I'll show you in a minute. Feed base. We wanted producers to understand the efficiency with which they were producing beef, how much grass was being grown, how much was being consumed, and how much beef was going out the gate. And importantly, while they were doing that, what was the trend in their land condition, and how would they then start to undertake activities to measure that? And most importantly, looking at their long-term carrying capacity and what effect it was having on their paddocks. So we set off with the pilot, and we're very grateful to have had QDAF, now QDPI, as the lead organisation. QDAF itself had two businesses, the Fitzroy and the Burdekin groups. We had a private veterinarian, the Northern Australian Veterinary Group from Cloncurry, had a group. We had Bush Agribusiness who conducted a corporate group on the Barkly, tablelands. We had an Indigenous group, mainly in Queensland, with eight businesses, and then we had Western Australia, which was quite a large region that they had to cover. But in the pilot, we had 400,000 breeders and about 12 million hectares being managed. Their interventions, as I said before, after they went and measured their baseline and then they went back and they had a discussion, it was very interesting to listen to the groups and what they were coming back with as their interventions. And their interventions were, one group decided, well, you know what, we really have to be able to weigh our cattle, and we don't have a good way of doing that. So everybody in the group decided that they would purchase a set of scales and a scale head. And then they got Gallagher in, because there's a Gallagher scales, won the tender, and Gallagher in to then go and train the group on how to use it, how to use that technology. And so that was their first step within it. Other people wanted upskilling in human resource management, from how to have a tough conversation without yelling at someone or throwing rocks at someone in the yard, to variations on bull management. There was calf management, there was cow nutrition. I think 2 of our groups decided to undertake a carbon edge course. Others took on nutrition edge courses, which were nutrition edge and grazing management edge courses. And the Indigenous group in particular, and this is something that I was very, very proud of, and was that the Indigenous group, their core reason for being was that they needed to create employment opportunities for their people in their communities. And although they had one Indigenous land holding, they had all these non-Indigenous land holdings around it. And so they decided that they would it be possible, how would they do it, how could they initiate worker exchanges so they could get young people working out amongst other non-Indigenous properties in stock camps to increase their skills. The Indigenous group also decided that biosecurity training was really important to them, and they engaged Animal Health Australia to come up with some pretty cool ways to train the locals. So what does a group analysis look like? Well, initially it started off like this. It's a bit more comprehensive now because we do a full business analysis with cost of production. But there we would have, this is a consolidated group. From that you would see cattle sales, herd gross profit per adult equivalent, and you can tell this is pretty much central Queensland. If you looked at the herd productivity in kilograms of beef per AE, it's sitting around 100 on average every year that they looked at it. But very interesting was looking at that high and low. The low was 79, the highest was 177 kilograms of beef per AE, which is quite amazing, really pulling that up. Also, the reproductive rate sat between 61 and 91%, just showing the variation and how much room for improvement we still have in the north. So right at the end, not only did the groups get to meet amongst themselves, we also conduct a draft once a year where everybody in that cohort that's currently undergoing the measuring intervention, go back and measure, have the discussions, come together, and we have a draft where all those groups come together and we discuss ways of improvement of beef production with them. Just quickly, from the pilot, 60% of producers increased their producer knowledge across areas of herd management, feed base, and business management. 61% of producers increased skills in at least one area, and 50% of producers reported skill development in more than one area. There was an estimated average annual net benefit that was positive for producers. However, this was affected by adoption rate and attribution rates within the groups, and by the interventions in which they chose to do. So things that were really interventions that impacted on productivity had a big effect. And I can tell you that one of the biggest things that I saw was the Indigenous group decided that they would get veterinarians to come in and preg test their herd and fetal age their herd and then do a sell-off strategy for them. And it provided one of the biggest adoption and attribution rates amongst the pilot. So it's quite amazing. In phase 2, independently, our independent evaluator suggested our benefit to cost ratio for phase 2 will be about 1.7. Again, reproduction, 5% increase in weaning rate was what we were aiming for. We got a 7%, and that was mainly for producers that really focused on interventions that affected weaning rate. So where are we with phase 2? In 2024, we had 23 businesses signed up. We've got a target of another 36 in 2025. We've trained 5 new facilitators to help us, to help the industry. All those businesses will be undergoing full business analysis, and I look forward to the annual draft in 2026. So in summary, we've had positive benefits on producers with the Pathways to Practice MB2 program. We've delivered transformational change to some participants, such as the Indigenous group, which I'm very, very proud of. And we've encouraged that peer-to-peer networking, and phase 2 was endorsed by NABRAC to continue. So NABRAC sees benefit in it. And the other thing that I'm very proud of is that those groups that started just as a pilot came back to us and said, we really want to continue. How do we do that? And so having those legacy groups in the industry and knowing that they'll be benchmarking against each other and improving as they're going ahead, I hope that that grows. And for the Northern industry, my view and my vision is that I'd really like to see something like the bird chip cropping group, but occurring within a beef enterprises in the north. And that's all I've got. Thank you.